Good morning and welcome to another James Loves Butter uploaded podcast. Really good to have you here. Welcome to anybody new or any of my subscribers. It's really great to have you back, or welcome if you are new. Please like, please subscribe, hit the notification button, leave any comments or any questions that you want to ask. Please don't hesitate. I'm going to get straight back into it. This is under the title, as you would see, Rehab Part 2. So I'd last described Rehab Part 1. You know, this channel is about life experiences, my own journey in various different ways, some funny stories, some meaningful stories, and then also some unboxings that I do regarding some clothing and footwear and stuff. Something that I'm interested in. So contextually, what I'm talking about, and just to recap, that I found myself going into rehab and I was really happy about that. And to paint the picture of what my life was like at that time, I was thinking this morning, very similar, I imagine, guys that are in, don't misconstrue me, but parallels and analogies, you know, that are in the mob and they're fearful for their own life, and then they go into witness protection, or they get, you know, into a situation where they have to sort of turn on their bosses in order to get a minimized sentence, or they're fearful of their life. And what I mean by that is addiction that I'd started going into with you know, a passion of substance use and drugs and a way of life had suddenly sort of flipped and turned on me and was killing me. What a day in my life looked like was, you know, living in a homeless shelter, eating where I could, which would consist of Sikh temples, Christian organisations, food banks if I was lucky enough to get a voucher. And I don't mean that they wouldn't provide me one if it was I could attend an appointment to get a voucher. You know, in order to smoke cigarettes, I'd have to pick up, you know, cigarettes off the floor, dog ends and stuff, and roll them up to smoke, you know, and shoplift to get sandwiches, and because all my money would always go on drugs. And at that point I was only being paid once every 2 weeks because I was on a, you know, on the dole, on a gyro, and then that money would be spent in a few hours. I'd be lucky to wake up with some money the next day. So then the rest of the time was spent of hustling, bustling, manipulating, deviating people from their own etc, you get the point. So, you know, really happy to go to rehab. So just to paint a picture, you know, upon arrival, and just to say that, let's call it, I was in there with 12 people. Well, I would say out of those 12 people, there's only 4 of us left that are not dead. I remember somebody coming in to do a talk when I was in there, and he said, look at the person next to you, and the likelihood that he's going to die is pretty high. Look around, the majority of you are going to die and not going to make it. And it hit hard, but I knew that to be true from my own experience because of my life in addiction and alcoholism, and the amount of different groups of people that I've been around over the years. You know, it was evident. People were dying left, right and centre from my own experience. So what they do, if you're put into a group, or there's the group of people that are already sort of integrated into that facility, and you get offered to do something called a life story. And that is what it says on the tin. You get an opportunity to spend a few days writing your own life story or your own version of events, to give the group and the facilitators, the staff, an understanding of who you are, what you're about. Because we all go in there and we all put on our stage character. We're like actors, you know, we're trying to put our best foot forward to try and present that, you know, that you're doing all right, you're not as bad. And I don't mean on purpose, it's just defense mechanisms and survival modes, you know, and egos and all that kind of thing. So I spent a few days, and I'm not going to give you my life story, but just to give you an idea to present this. So it would consist of, okay, so I was brought up with quite a lot of money initially. My father was a very successful businessman, although potentially he was an alcoholic and became a full-blown alcoholic, and that killed him. That was about 14 years ago. I went to 9 different schools. I lived in Spain around the age 7, 8, 9, give or take, on the Costa del Crime. I was influenced by a collective of London gangsters that lived out there at the time as a result of some gold bullion robberies. So I was very familiar with those characters, which influenced me in hindsight. I went to various different schools. I went to a private school in Spain, and I came back to a public school. I moved around a lot of different areas. My last 3 years of my life, schooling wise, 13 to 16, was at a Rudolf Steiner school, which was a boarding school, which was absolutely fantastic. My dad married 4 times, divorced 4 times. I had a daughter, then I didn't see my daughter for 7 years. I lived with a grandmother. Various different jobs, from financial institutions, administration, telesales, call centers, to mortgage companies, to roofing, to crime, in amongst all that. So, so many different levels and variants of the stuff that I'd been in. And then then we had the prison years, which consisted of 10 prison sentences. I spent about 5 years in prison. Consisted of a larger sentence and a lot of little sentences where I would either breach probation on purpose to escape addiction again, get off the gear, put myself back in, etc., etc. A good family, a small family. So, just to give you a picture, an idea, that's what I spent a few days writing down, a life story of what had gone on for me. So I present that to the group, so they get an idea and understanding. And it's almost like an initiation into the group. So you present everything, and then everybody shares back and talks back and go, I really understand and identify with what you're talking about there. And you get connected within that facility. But there's all sorts of characters within that, some are in denial, some are really willing, a few, some are really resentful, some are antagonistic, some are still up to their old tricks and old ideas, and it doesn't end well for people. I'm still friends with James, who I was there with at the time. He was one of the first guys I met in there, and we stayed friends. Some people want permanent sobriety, some people just want to learn how to drink like a gentleman, all this sort of stuff that goes on. For me, it was apparent from my own experience that the abstinent-based recovery was the thing that I needed to look at or get into, because looking at, again, born out of my own experience, every substance I ever touch, it just ends up really in a bad place, and that can be from drinking, and I drink and then I get back on cocaine, or I start smoking weed and then I think I can use cocaine, and then I use cocaine, it ends up back on crack, I use crack, and then I want to use heroin to bring me some, and then I'm back on a methadone script, and then I'm just like, how did this all happen? And it all started off with that first joint, that first glass of wine, that first beer, or that spliff with a bit of gear in it, with a bit of heroin in it, all that sort of stuff. Also talking about the history of my drug use, I started using solvents at about 11, 12. I was drinking alcohol when I lived in Spain, and that was when I was about 8 or 9. And then also going back to school, I would have been in Tipex thinners and deodorant off the blazer, all that kind of stuff. And then I got into a bit of drinking, smoking banana skins on the park with some cider at 12. And then I went on to the Rudolf Steiner school, and I dabbled a little bit. I think there was a few magic mushroom situations, but nothing, and the odd spliff, but nothing much, it was all pretty reasonably clean cut. And then moving back to London, and that's kind of, I fell into the raving scene, so I started getting into weed at college and a lot of acid and magic mushrooms. They were the acid years, or a year, a condensed year of playing Mario Kart and taking acid, and then I started to get into the hardcore scene, which progressed into the jungle scene, and even within that, the drugs changed. So it went from like pink champagne, which is basically speed with food colouring in, but and base high quality, and to the doves, the double doves, the yellow callies, the snowballs, all that kind of thing. So I hit the raving scene and just took to it like a duck to water. I absolutely embraced it and loved it. And of course, drugs cost money, so you end up spending too much money, and all your wages end up going on your raving and stuff. So, you know, living for the weekend, so to speak, but which is pretty normal around the people that were around me at that time, at 18, 19. Majority of people lived at home, actually. I got my own place. I say I got my own place as a result of a dispute with my mum's partner at the time. It was seen that it wasn't good for me to be living there, and they got me my own flat on the Brighton Road in Purley, which is South London near Croydon. So I had the party house. People lived at home, their friends, and they'd come to me at the weekends, and we'd go out raving and come back. And, you know, I absolutely embraced it and loved it. It was amazing. But I'd always take it that one step further, always one step further. And then I started looking at the cocaine, and I got into cocaine at 18, 19, and that really took me. And as I went from the hardcore junk music scene into jungle, and that was a whole different dynamic and ambience and darkness that I loved. And I used to take cocaine alcoholically, and then I've discovered crack cocaine, and then from the crack cocaine, that was a whole different world. But I didn't get into heroin until I was 26, and then escaping that, back into cocaine use and drinking, you know, so all these different substances at different parts of my life, and then going back to another substance, trying to sort of recreate that old life, and always getting deeper and deeper, all the different jobs that I had from, you know, so from early I was always based within office work and financial institutions, whether it be call centres, telesales, administrative stuff. I wasn't an underwriter, but that kind of stuff behind the scenes within offices with people applying for loans and all that kind of thing. And then I went off the rails, and there was no work, and it was criminality. And then I did some roofing at a point, and then I got back into a mortgage company. And then there was a point where the line was drawn, and I was just completely immersed within the criminal fraternity. Because there was a time when I had a finger in both pies, a foot in each. But eventually you get to the point where you're just so taken by the drugs and that lifestyle that, you know, working is impossible, and because of the nature of addiction. I digressed a little bit then, but just to create that picture. So, you know, obviously being in that environment, to be able to give you that, or give that life story, was absolutely so important, to feel connected to people within there, for people to know you, and people come up to you after, like, wow, man, that's really interesting, you know. And I guess really in hindsight, it's about a little bit of self-worth and being validated, and actually seeing that you're not just a loser, you're a nobody. You have got some qualities, and, you know, you have got some interesting stuff to say, and, you know, you're just not a bloody deadbeat junkie, because that's what really my life had come to. When you're separated from everybody and not everything worthwhile in life, to have connection with other drug addicts was just absolutely the bright spot of my life, and actually still is today. So that was that. So, you know, within this, and I talked about groups and getting to know people and conflict and confrontation, and it can be quite difficult in that place, especially being so raw, and this old character that I had. And we used to do some art therapy within there. And to give you an idea of what my mindset was the double life. So I've got the niceness, the kindness, and me in one sense, but I had the other survival character, and the darkness of the character that I'd become or had formulated to survive. And I remember, so I was like two different people trying to get to the good side. And I remember going in there, I was so happy to be in there, and I'd been funded a charity bed, so I was even another level of gratitude when I got in there. And I had so much energy coming off the methadone, and so much gratitude and stuff, and I wanted to keep busy because my mind was a million miles an hour. I started making these little little bracelets with beads on, with people's names on, or sayings. So I'd get to know people, or it'd be things like "just for today," or "isness," or "it's just meant to be." All those kind of sayings. So I was going around and I was making these things. I was just feverishly keeping myself busy, but I wanted to sort of you know, people would look at it as people pleasing, or it was just I was so happy to be in that new world. In fact, going back to when I was at the Rudolph Steiner School from about the age of 13 to 16, I always used to go to Brighton. I used to go to a bead shop down there. I remember making my mum some beads and stuff for her birthday. I was always into that sort of thing. I was an eclectic kid, you know, from Axl Rose to Kurt Cobain, Pink Floyd, you know, to Megadeth to Metallica to Red Hot Chili Peppers. All these different bands and groups, and then I got into like the Stone Roses and the Manchester scene, and then obviously later on I got into the hardcore and jungle scene, and Mum was into Motown, you know, all these different worlds that I was always interested in, always been rather collective, but for a point I was just away from all that and just in my lane. So that was what I was doing. But in this art therapy stuff, I was doing pictures, and interested in reflection and stuff that I was drawing at that time was kind of almost sinister. It was like, I think I did a portrait of Kurt Cobain. I did a portrait of Biggie Smalls. He was Biggie Smalls, Ready to Die, Born to Die. Was it that album, Give Me the Loot? It was very pivotal when I was about 17 or 18. So I did Biggie Smalls. I also did Lana Del Rey. I thought she was beautiful. I used to have a picture of her on my prison wall. Shout out to Samantha. I also had so Kurt Cobain, Biggie Smalls, Lana Del Rey. So these pivotal characters that have been influenced in my own life. And then I also had the Joker, Heath Ledger's Joker, looking kind of sinister with that smile. So, you know, and I always use these terms like social chameleon. I've got some clown tattoo, or have got clown tattoos, which is always smile in the face of adversity. One of the guys that led the art therapy guy was like, interesting to see what you're drawing, James, and things that appeal to you, and he'd talk about it. And that was really nice for somebody to take an interest in me as a character. And, you know, I got into a couple of conflicts with a couple of guys there. And I remember I was very frustrated with this one guy, and we come into conflict, and this guy was about, you know, 6'1", 6'2". He was a big guy, a big lump. And he was very vocal, and he was going to do this, and I'll just give him a look. And the obsession to the resentment that was in me, and I was a silent assassin. So I went to bed one night whilst on rehab, and I'd plotted to, you know, take out the whole rehab. I was going to take everybody out. I was going to do a chopper read and go and attack every single part. I mean, this is, you know, an irrational thought, but this is where I was, you know, then within that environment. And this was in 2014, you know, that how dare they sort of insult me, offend me. I'm trying to do the best that I can, and thank God for the staff in there that I was able to vocalise and talk about this stuff and even validate me. I remember one of the art therapist guy that was also a guy that had a long-term sobriety. He goes, James, that you've got nothing to prove in here. I can see within you that, you know, your intelligence, and, you know, you don't need to, it's clear that if you wanted to, you know, do this guy harm, that you would, you know, take him out without thought. And that wasn't a good thing, but it was also, I appreciated that he could see that I had that within me. And I hope you understand what I'm trying to say with that, because I'm not proud of that, but it's something that needed addressing. But it was also, I needed validating to be able to have somebody accept that, and then we could discuss it and talk about it, if that makes sense. Anyway. So all this stuff went on within rehab and stuff, and all these characters and confrontations and good stuff and lovely stuff. We used to do this thing where at the end of the week, you get you'd go in and do something kind for somebody without them knowing. And on Friday, we'd have tea and cakes. So we'd have somebody come and do a share or a talk, and then we'd finish early, have some tea and cakes. We'd go in the kitchen, we'd sit around, where you'd write something positive about somebody that they'd done within the week. There was a lot of positive stuff that went on, don't misconstrue me. So you say, oh, well done so-and-so for their life story, you did really well. Well done for so-and-so for admitting they've got a problem here. Well done for so-and-so for addressing that. You can do it, and all that kind of thing. Real positive, so you finish with a positive note on a Friday. A lot of people didn't like the weekends because there was a lot of time to kill. Unless you were productive and proactive in doing something, it could have seemed like a really long time. And especially if you're not into the assignments that they were setting you, or the tasks, or the writing, or the reading. I was listening to stuff, I was reading a lot of stuff, I was really interested in this stuff. And a lot of people weren't. We get to watch a film over the weekend too, which was cool. Spend a bit of time doing that. I played ultimate frisbee as a kid. As a 16, 17, I played for Great Britain Juniors, so I ordered a frisbee, and I'd take a couple of guys at the park and we start playing ultimate, or just throwing the disc around, which was great for sweating out the methadone and the drugs out of my system and running around and stuff. That was cool. Anyway, loads of stuff went in between and around that stuff. I was in there for 3 months. Anyway, long story short, the point I was trying to make is life story at the beginning. They do something at the end of your rehab stay called the 3 chairs, which is fundamentally this: your life in addiction before you came in, your time in rehab, and then what you're looking to do when you get out. So there's a beginning, a middle, and the end, or the future, so to speak. So at the end of your time there, you get this opportunity, closure, so that's what I did. So, and obviously as a result of being in there and going through some processes within the rehab, you see, you change, you evolve, you get perspective, you get hindsight and retrospect. So I was able to look back at my old life with a new pair of glasses and a new perspective. I could see my growth and change and develop as a person whilst in the institution of rehab, through going in when I first walked through the door, bravado, sort of IGS, imaginary gangster syndrome, and some of it wasn't imaginary, and then losing those layers, changing, softening, going through some processes that brought about a change within me, some family counselling, some interactions, some meetings, some challenges, some prayer, all these different things. So I presented what I saw things like before I came in. I actually played a song to introduce that, which was My Skin of the Streets, Too Much Brandy. That was my intro tune to my old life. And then I talked about my time and growth and development whilst in there. I played another song for that. I think it was a Jack Cure song, Behind These Prison Walls. And then third was what I see for the future and what I wanted to do, and how I saw, not that I could predict my future or life, but I could definitely see what I was going to get into and the direction I was going in maintaining my sobriety and being abstinent and the things that I would need to do that. And then I played another a song which was I think it was a Tanya Stevens song, which was like a reggae artist, and something like that. Anyway, so that happened, and it was a real interesting process, and I really enjoyed it. Actually, it was quite entertaining, and it was like a beginning, middle, and end, but it was just the beginning, actually. And they give you some tips and advice of staying in contact, and what I would do is I built a community already of people within there and a friend, and I was going to go on from there, and everybody said goodbye, and then they give you a book with messages and I wish you all the best and all that kind of thing. And I made a couple of important connections within that I would maintain to stay connected with once leaving the institution. So for me, in a nutshell, rehab part 2, be open, be honest, be prepared to be challenged. Look at the things that you find difficulty talking about and talk about them. Be an open book, prepared to be challenged, prepared to have some of your old ideas challenged, your old belief systems. For example, in my old belief system, to if somebody was doing something dishonest or dodgy, I would keep your mouth shut. You don't grasp. Snitches get stitches, all that BS, you know what I mean? Where to the point that actually within these environments, if somebody's up to something, it's best to bring it to the attention of the staff, because it could save their life or somebody else's life, because people take hostages and stuff, so getting rid of those old ideas and mentalities, and then set me out a plan of action for moving forward, which I did. I'm still here. there are various types of recoveries out there. You know, have a look at them all, see what's best for you. I'm definitely not here to say, and that's why I'm not talking about my own personal recovery journey in the context of what I particularly did. Happy to talk about that with anybody. You know, if you want to comment or message me, that's a different thing, but certainly not on this platform. I think that's it really. But on the whole, it was a really profound experience, very enjoyable, life-changing for me, for my family, for people in my communities. I was able to sort of right some wrongs, re-establish some old acquaintances and friends, and rebuild and repay various different things, to now being a productive member of community within a productive member of the community, and a new life and a new beginning that started predominantly in 2014, and it's continued until today. Thank you so much for listening. Sorry if I rambled at any parts, but like I say, I do this in one take, so it's not perfect, but I just want to give you what comes up for me, and an air of I was going to say natural. It's natural. Anyway, you take care. Cheers. Bye bye. James loves butter. Like and subscribe.